here, and we'll be able to answer those at the end. We're talking about something really important. If you've been at home and you've been watching one of your favorite shows and the internet goes down, or you're having issues with your router, or you're curious where is the best place for the best signal for the Wi-Fi router, where would it be? This man right here is here to tell us.
Yeah, so we get this, we don't really get this question a lot, but we actually find out when troubleshooting issues at people's houses on why certain devices aren't connecting, or they're buffering, or it really doesn't make any sense because they have fiber optics to their house and it's like super fast, and from everything we can see it's fine, but the devices connected to it, their signals aren't very good. And we might go out and find out, well, the router got moved behind their brand new 80-inch TV, and it does not work that way. It barely works at all because the TV's metal, and it reflects the entire signal back outside the house. So I thought, you know what, this would be a good idea to let everybody know some ideas, and you might see some improvements on your connection, because it may not be your internet connection coming in that's the limiting factor. It might be how things are set up inside the house. So I thought we'd go over a couple of those things.
So let's talk about some places that Wi-Fi routers are not good to be, in, and let's also talk about some places that they should be that might be a great location for them.
Yeah. So, like I was saying a minute ago, metal straight up reflects Wi-Fi. It just straight up bounces off of it and goes the other way.
Good to know.
So mirrors, if you put it in front of a mirror, whatever's on the other side of that mirror, like if it's another wall in another bedroom, it's going to have a hard time. It won't get the signal directly. It'll get it from bouncing around the rest of the building. So it's the least direct, and it's going to have a slower connection speed.
What about for mine? Mine has a bunch of stuff in front of it. It's kind of blocked so that you can't see the router because,
that's bad.
So, visually, I wanted to hide the router so that my nice decor was great, but then I realized I'm putting these big things in front of the router.
Yeah,
not good, right?
So ideally, you want to have it up high. You want to have it close to where the most devices are. They're going to connect to it. You don't want to put it next to the refrigerator. You don't want to have it next to the microwave. You don't want it by a fish tank. Water sound does not go through water. If you've ever tried screaming underwater, it doesn't work.
Well, that makes sense too. Yeah.
And interestingly enough, I had a house where between the house and the garage, the insulation had that metal foil on it.
Oh, right.
And it literally had zero signal, like from one side to the other, because the whole wall was that way. It just didn't work.
Yeah, so if you have the foil insulation, that's not a good thing either, too. So if you're a homeowner, you may or may not know that, and if you don't, you may want to check that out. Because, Patrick, we talked about it, internet, a necessity. If you're needing to work, if you have a deadline, you don't want to have issues with your router. And so finding out places, like I had no idea that, I have issues sometimes, connectivity on and so forth, and yeah, it's blocked by big things because I'm trying to hide it. And so I want to, these look great though. See, this router here is, and some of these are super easy to.
Yeah. So this is our Wi-Fi router for Wind River Internet. This is like the top of the line Wi-Fi 6, greatest and latest. So this is what we install now on our fiber and on our wireless installs. You can either purchase it outright or you can rent it for $7.95 a month, and then you can get additional ones as mesh routers, which is the next thing I was going to talk about.
Okay.
For $5 a month. And the cool thing about that is, if we typically install these like in the living room, because that's usually kind of where people hang out. That's where the gaming consoles are, the TV.
Most things that are connecting, like you said, yeah.
But then what you can do is you can put a mesh router like right in the center of the house, and that way that back room with the back TV will have a good connection because it'll kind of repeat the signal, and it'll use a dedicated antenna and radio frequency to connect the mesh routers. And the best thing you can do if you really want to get it optimized is you run an Ethernet cable between the routers. Nice. And that'll
It's like direct line,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. It makes
right
it even better.
Talk about antennas real quick, about the positioning of the
antennas. So the antennas, if you have all of our routers are built internally, so it doesn't really matter too much as long as they're placed the way they were bought. If you have an install from us from like 10 years ago, it looks like this, and it's probably fading in color. or like this, and they were like $50. They were great when the internet speeds were like 10 megs, but now that we've got 100 meg plans for the wireless, and you need something more like this.
Yeah, definitely.
And then our first fiber they have these little mesh units too.
Yeah, that's nice because that's easily to just kind of hide and not really without having anything in front of it. It almost hides itself.
So they're pretty handy. You can upgrade if you still have one of these in your house. Like I said, you can either buy the router. I think they're $250 for this top of the line one, or you can just rent it, which is what I recommend doing. Because if we upgrade to the next best thing when it comes out, we'll just swap it and it won't cost you anything.
Easy. Yeah, this is really light too, by the way. This big one. So it's not like it's heavy or bulky or anything like that. It's really, really light too. So as we talk about locations for your Wi-Fi routers, this is really great information. And you may be watching this video at work. You may be cruising around and it's just on your phone and or on your vehicle, but you might want to check into where your router is located when you go home. Might be something you want to do because it's very important, and we're finding mirrors, refrigerators, microwaves, that foil insulation. Me, myself, who has blocked my routers that are in my living room that I don't want people to see, so I put a bunch of big, bulky decor in front of them, and a couple of the items I know for sure now that talking to Patrick are probably affecting my internet signal.
So if you don't have our service at Wind River Internet, or you have your own router that you have with Wind River Internet, a lot of them look like little spiders with a bunch of antennas on them. And usually you pay more for each antenna to have dual band, triple band, tri-band, 6-band. And usually the thought is, oh, well, if they've got more antennas, they're better, which is kind of true until you get to the point where they're interfering with each other or the placement of them's wrong.
That got complicated real fast.
If a lot of people, what they would take those antennas and they're like, oh, well, I should angle them all out so it's spread out. And the thought process is cool, then we'll have more coverage. But in reality, the way that those antennas work is the signal that comes off of them is like a donut. It's squished, and if you turn it sideways, the signal goes up into the sky and down into the ground. And so it's actually the worst possible thing you could do for those, even though they look great in pictures and they actually put it on the boxes that way.
Is it like that backup router I use at work that has the...
Oh, yeah.
So I got to make sure those are up and down?
Yeah, up and down work the
good.
best. But like in your
lesson.
case, it's in the same room, it really doesn't matter.
Okay.
But if you're trying to get the most amount of distance, like the further away it is and it's at an angle, the more it's going to be shooting above or below it. And also, the way that it works is it's usually the signals goes around the bottom of the device more than the top, so higher up the better. Okay. You don't ever want to like leave it straight on the ground. So
mine's not straight on the ground. It's close to the ground though.
And also, like, typically putting them in the basement's not the best idea.
That one I would guess too. I mean, even if what if you do a lot of work in the basement though?
Well, then maybe you'd want to do a mesh router down there.
Okay.
Or like in the ceiling, or up high downstairs to repeat the signal from the other place. And then, a lot of people, if they want signal in their garage, they'll have that same problem. There's something, because there's a firewall between the house and the garage, you may have to put a mesh router in the garage.
Okay. What's this note you put here? Wi-Fi, AGN, AC. I don't know any of that.
Oh, so they got really confusing really fast. So back in like 2000, they came out with Wi-Fi, and they started out with wireless B.
Okay.
Which was 2.4 gigahertz. And then they came out with wireless A, which was 5 gigahertz. And like, well, they're going backwards now. And then they went to G, and like, what the heck is going on here? Okay. And G did both the 2.4 and the 5, and then N, which also did it. And then there's AC, and each iteration of it just
So this is like different Microsoft versions?
Yeah. So basically, they're upgraded versions every time they come out with a new, and it allowed for greater speeds, better distance, the ability to bounce off walls better, and so basically, they gave up on all that, and they're like, you know what? We're just going to call them like Wi-Fi 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the current iteration is 6, and that's what this is.
Awesome. Okay. Cool. The nicest one.
And then for the future technology, the next thing, just to throw everybody off, they're calling it 6E. Like, why didn't you just call it 7?
Yeah, I know, no joke. I love when they do stuff like that.
But 6E introduces the 6 gigahertz band of wireless spectrum, and it's cleaner. There's less interference, but pretty much no devices use it right now. And the only thing it's really good for at the moment is the meshes, to talk between the mesh radios. And that's something we're going to probably be introducing later this year. And if you have a leased router and you're having connection issues, we'll upgrade people for free to those.
Nice, that'll be good. Well, reach out to Wind River Internet if you're curious about that, and as they continue to expand with the routers, but the top of the line, this is super light too, so that's nice as well. And then the mesh routers are really small and just kind of incognito too. You kind of mentioned a little bit on the difference between 2.4 and 5 and 6. But
Yeah, so when you set up the router, you can usually pick, and a lot of them will say like this is 2.4 or the 5 gigahertz. The 2.4 is a lower frequency, so it what they call propagates better through walls, and it goes further, and it sounds like it's the better one, except there's not a lot of the spectrum. There's not as much frequencies available, so it's slower.
right.
There's also, because there's only like basically 3 usable frequencies, there's a lot of interference. So it makes it even slower and slower.
Right.
So it's good for what they call Internet of Things devices, like if you have remote control lights or things that don't use a lot of bandwidth.
Oh, okay.
Vacuum cleaners, toasters, and microwaves, TVs, or not TVs because they're high bandwidth devices, but those things you can.
Are there microwaves that connect to the internet?
Yeah, I have one. It's an Alexa one. You can tell it to pop popcorn.
Dang. Dang. I want to go to
Actually,
Patrick's house.
there's one right here. The one in here. They're only like $30.
Oh, they're only like $30. We need to do a whole episode on the Alexa microwave. Do an infomercial. That'd be great.
Oh yeah,
That's cool.
So the 5 gigahertz is the one that most devices nowadays use. The problem with it is it doesn't go through the walls as well. So you may only be able to get one room over on that, but it is significantly faster. There's multiple channels, like a dozen that you can use, less interference. Although it is getting more congested just because everybody has it.
So we'll move up to 6.
So at some point we're gonna move up to 6. But that's the reason why you might want to lease instead of buying them.
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah, what about AI? Are they going to have little AI stuff in here? Or?
Actually, yes.
I figured.
Yeah, they do a little bit of that already,
right.
Especially in the Wi-Fi 6 stuff. They do band steering, and they automatically switch the frequencies and the antennas and the modes to get the best possible connection.
Wow.
And they call it like beamforming, where it detects how it's bouncing off the walls and stuff.
Wow.
It's actually really cool stuff.
That is cool.
Yeah.
Smarter and smarter, I tell you what. Young Wyatt, do we have any questions? All right, well, we're talking about wireless routers and the location. The one thing I want you to do, if you're listening to this, if you're watching, is to go home, or when you get home, check where your router is located. Some tips again from Patrick about mirrors, if they're blocked on the ground or low to the ground, higher the better. And then just kind of finding out more about what kind of router you have, and if you need to have a mesh router to maybe get some signal throughout the house if you've got kids and they're using it, or maybe you do some work like I do in a separate room of the house. You need to make sure that you've got some good internet for that.
Yeah, and just because your internet, it's not an on or off thing, right? Your internet, it's like a scale. So it may be working, but some of these optimization tips, like, oh, well, it's behind a bookshelf, but it works fine. You won't realize it until you're like downloading, the
Right.
latest Microsoft update or something, and it went from being 4 hours down to 10 minutes. Like, oh, I guess I shouldn't have it behind the bookshelf.
Right. No, exactly. That's right. And that's why I want all of us to take these tips and for you to go home and check where your router is at, and maybe find a place that it would be better optimized for your usage, because you do want to get the most out of it. It's something we use all the time, and it's not going anywhere. It's constantly advancing. So if you have questions, reach out to Patrick, Wind River Internet.